A developing story at 5. The BCA has issued an Amber Alert for a 5-year-old girl from Watkins. This is Elena, and she was last seen at her house at 2 in the morning. According to investigators, families say they noticed her missing about 8 this morning.
In the summer of 2016, a tornado tore through Watkins, Minnesota. Homes were damaged, trees were ripped from the ground, and the small town was left picking up the pieces. But neighbors came together, clearing debris and rebuilding what they could. Slowly, life began returning to normal. Then, just weeks later, the town was struck by a tragedy no one saw coming. One night, a 5-year-old girl went to sleep under the same roof as her parents. By morning, she was the only one missing. At first, no one could explain how a child could disappear without anyone hearing or seeing a thing. But as investigators began pulling the case apart, they uncovered a truth that shocked the community even more than the tornado itself. This is the story of Elena. Elena was 5, and she was fearless. She loved pink and purple and dressing up, but she'd just as happily be out in the yard, covered in mud, helping her dad with whatever he was working on. She once climbed up onto the shed roof so she could hand him tools while he fixed it. That was Elena. Her mum, Kayla, called her their little peanut. Her dad, Matt, was her whole world, and she followed him everywhere. She adored her older brother and wanted to do everything he did. And at night, she slept with a blanket. A frozen blanket, Elsa on the front, that went everywhere she did. Her mother used to tell her that when the sun went down and the sky turned gold, that was heaven looking back at you. In 2 months, Elena would turn 6. Her birthday landed on Halloween, and she was already counting the days. That last quiet night was Friday, August 19th, 2016. After their softball game, Matt and his friend and co-worker Zachary Anderson went out with the rest of the team, the way they often did. A stop at the Riverside Tavern first, and when that bar closed around 1 in the morning, they moved on to another place nearby. Sometime after 2, they headed back to the house. Anderson was a familiar face there. He and Matt worked together, locating and marking underground utility lines. They'd been on the same softball team for a while, and he'd crashed at the house plenty of times before. Nobody thought a thing of it. By then, Kayla had already carried Elena up to bed and tucked her in with her blanket. Matt and Anderson stayed up talking a while longer. Around 4, they finally called it a night. Matt went to bed, and Anderson settled in to sleep there, just like he had so many times before. The house went dark and quiet, everyone asleep, nothing out of place. It's the last calm moment in this story. At 8 the next morning, Elena's parents woke up, and she wasn't in her bed, not in her room, not anywhere in the house. And as they searched, the panic began to build. Because it wasn't only Elena who was gone. Matt's truck, a 2002 GMC Sierra, was missing from the driveway. His phone, which he'd left inside it, was gone too. And so was Zachary. Elena, the truck, the phone, their house guest, all of it, gone at once. They called it in a little before 10. The Meeker County Sheriff's Office responded, and the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension soon joined the search. Deputies went door to door. Investigators pulled security footage from businesses around town, hoping to catch the truck heading in some direction. Any direction. Early that afternoon, the state issued an Amber Alert. A 5-year-old girl from Watkins, last seen at 2 a.m., a description of the man she might be with, a shaggy beard, and possibly a black shirt from the local softball league.
Issued an Amber Alert for a 5-year-old girl from Watkins. This is Elena, and she was last seen at her house at 2 in the morning. According to investigators, families say they noticed her missing about 8 this morning. According to police, Anderson has no sex offender history, and they aren't sure of a motive. The BCA says that Anderson now has a shaggy short beard and may be wearing a black t-shirt like this that says Riverside, Minnesota softball.
Now the whole state was watching. But the people running the search still had no idea which way to send them. They had two things to chase, and they chased both. The first was the phone. As long as Matt's cell was on inside that truck, it was leaving a trail, and investigators traced it north, watching it ping off towers up in Todd County through the morning. Then, at 9 a.m., it went dead. Someone had switched it off. The second was a face. A man matching Anderson's description had been seen at a convenience store in Browerville, north of Watkins, around 8:30 that morning. And he was alone. No little girl with him. That single detail sat heavy on everyone who heard it, and it pushed them to move faster. Time was working against them, and they knew it. Then, a little after 2 in the afternoon, the phone rang at the Cass County Sheriff's Office, and everything changed. It was Anderson's own father. He'd seen the Amber Alert, and he believed the man they were searching for was his son. Earlier that day, he said, Zachary had called and asked to use the family's cabin up near Motley, roughly 80 miles north of Watkins, and he gave deputies permission to go there and search it. Cars were sent immediately. It was a long drive north, and the whole way, the same questions rode along with them. What would they find at that cabin? Would Elena still be there? Would she still be alive? The cabin sat on a remote wooded stretch of land in Cass County. The moment officers arrived, they found their first sign: Matt's stolen truck, pushed down into a ravine on the property and angled like someone had tried to hide it. Inside the cabin, it got worse. A shotgun on the table. Ammunition spilled beside it. And a note, one that read as though Anderson meant to take his own life, with blood dried in one corner. But the cabin was empty. No Anderson, no Elena. Outside, a set of footprints led away from the building and into the trees. A K-9 team picked up the trail, a dog named Yankee, and began working a scent down toward a low, marshy stretch of swamp behind the property. The dog kept pulling toward the water. Around 4:30 in the afternoon, they found him. Zachary Anderson was standing knee-deep in the swamp, alone, with fresh cuts on his arm. He didn't run. He didn't resist. He let them take him without a fight. They asked him where the girl was. "What girl?" he said. They read him his rights. 3 times he told them he didn't want to talk. But they couldn't stop. They still didn't know whether Elena was alive somewhere, and every second mattered. They kept pressing. Was she out here in the swamp, they asked, or did they need to look somewhere else? And finally, quietly, he told them, in the swamp. He asked for a cigarette. Then he pointed them to the spot. A little after 6 that evening, they recovered Elena from the water. A short distance away, following another scent from the cabin, the dog turned up something else. Her frozen blanket. That was the moment the search ended. The Amber Alert was cancelled, not because they'd found her safe, but because there was no longer anyone to save. This had become a homicide.
And I just thought about it.
Craig Speldrick is among those living inside the Wilderness Park private estates. It's where the body of Elena Ertl was found in a swamp just beyond the Anderson family cabin.
And I decided something had to be done.
Speldrick built a tasteful timber cross for Elena, a place where others are now purging their grief.
And the people here are absolutely offended, you know. They are. They're heartbroken.
Well, it's a pretty tight community, really.
Folks like Ray Schultes and Anna Cash are stopping to pay respects to a child they never knew, but can't stop thinking about.
The community here's sadness is as if they had lived here. I
Right.
mean, it doesn't really matter where you are, who you are, where you're from, but when something happens so close to home.
Ray actually recalls seeing Anderson briefly at last Saturday's annual meeting.
Yeah, he came down to the clubhouse, you know, and it was just all muddy and dirty. He must have just come out of the swamp.
Now it's a Northwoods community left in mourning over a crime so unthinkable.
It's heartbreaking, that's all.
It's emotional. It's extremely cool.
She'll never be forgotten up there.
Weren't for that canine team, that suspect's capture would have at least been delayed, if not, wouldn't have happened.
Steve Pearson trains police dogs. He says it was Cass County Deputy Bill Connor's dog, Yankee, that ultimately led authorities to a swampy area in the woods about a quarter-mile from the cabin. Pearson trained Yankee roughly 5 years ago.
Their ability to smell and follow that odor is just absolutely remarkable.
Pearson says because authorities didn't have an item of clothing for Yankee to go off of, he believes the German Shepherd tracked Anderson's fear scent. Police say Anderson initially said, "What girl?" when they asked about Elena.
Those officers, when they got to that cabin, had no idea where to start. They tried using the helicopter to find people down in the woods and whatnot. I have no doubt that he would have gotten away.
Back in Watkins, and in the small Northwoods community near where she was found, the news landed like a physical blow. People who had never met Elena couldn't stop thinking about her. Near the spot where she'd been recovered, one man built a simple wooden cross so that others would have somewhere to go and grieve. Neighbors left flowers and little ceramic angels. It was a tight-knit place, and the grief moved through it as if everyone had lost someone of their own. One detail chilled them more than the rest. A resident later remembered crossing paths with Anderson at a community meeting near the cabin that same weekend, and how muddy and dirty he'd looked, as though he'd just come out of the swamp. And it might have ended very differently. An autopsy would soon confirm the worst of it. Elena had been asphyxiated and had suffered blunt force trauma, and there was evidence she had been sexually assaulted. She was 5 years old, 2 months from her 6th birthday. I'm not going to describe any more than that. She was so much more than the worst thing done to her, and she deserves to be remembered that way. Zachary Anderson, 25, was booked into jail and charged. The counts stacked up quickly: murder, criminal sexual conduct with a child, kidnapping. His bail was set at $1 million with conditions, or $2 million without. And the town he'd betrayed was left to try to absorb what had happened. They did it the only way they knew how: together.
We're pretty close-knit people around here.
Swapping stories over coffee can take a whole afternoon when you're in your 80s.
Just unbelievable.
Even for two friends who've seen a lot over the years, these past few days have been too much.
It shouldn't happen for a young kid that small, and it should never happen.
I've seen her around town. I'd go for walks. She'd wave, say hi. That's just the little girl she was.
Alice Lister can hardly find words to describe what all of Watkins is feeling.
It's been rough. I mean, Watkins has been through a lot. We've lost a lot, but we've all come together. It's a family community.
A town of 1,000 where everyone seems to know everyone and their pain.
A tragedy like this is unbelievable. Just something that doesn't happen here.
As these old friends struggle to understand what has happened, their long lives keep teaching them one important lesson.
We will survive. It's a community that has a lot of heartfelt feelings between each other, but we will survive.
3 days after she died, hundreds of people gathered for a candlelight vigil at St. Anthony Catholic Church, just across the road from where Elena had lived. In a town of 1,000, it felt like everyone came. One mourner said she just felt helpless, that the whole state seemed to be in shock. A fundraiser set up online to help the family blew past its goal within hours and kept climbing for days.
There are still some people out here tonight. It seems as if the entire town came to this church parking lot for a service to honor Elena. Now, some people were just too stricken with grief to speak to us, but everyone here came together to be surrounded by friends and family, those who knew and loved the sweet 5-year-old. Sounds of Frozen, Elena's favorite, came before prayer.
Beautiful, shy, like to play.
More people than you could count filled the St. Anthony Catholic Church parking lot. a way to come together to remember a vibrant girl who was never without a smile.
Like, you just want to be here to support the community and the family, and for this little girl who lost her life, it's sad.
Many wrestle with why this 5-year-old with so much life ahead of her was taken.
I just want to know why. What possesses people to do this?
Parents who have lost a child share in the family sorrow.
I'm so sorry that this happened to them. I'm so sorry it happened to her.
Not long after, the church parking lot filled again for a service in her honor. More people than anyone could count. The songs from Frozen played before the prayers. Neighbors, strangers, families who'd lost children of their own, all standing together for a little girl most of them had never met. And underneath all of it, the same question kept surfacing. Why? What could possibly drive someone to do this? And this is what made it so hard to answer. Anderson wasn't some stranger who'd wandered into town. Everybody liked him. He was easygoing, always smiling, the kind of guy people got along with. He had no history anyone could see. A few minor traffic violations, nothing more. No record that would have raised a flag. No motive anyone could point to. One man who'd grown up with Matt and knew Anderson from the softball league put it simply. He'd seemed like a good guy. That's exactly why it cut so deep. They had trusted him, and they'd had every reason to. But when investigators dug into Zachary Anderson's past, they found the record everyone had been looking at wasn't the whole story. 10 years earlier, in 2006, Anderson had been a teenager living with his mother next door to a woman in her early 30s, a single mother of 2 young children. According to court documents that surfaced later, he had become fixated on her. It started with notes left on her car, compliments, his phone number, an invitation to call if she wanted to date him. Then it escalated. One night that December, in the early hours of the morning, he showed up at her door and demanded she sleep with him, trying to force his way inside. He only fled when her boyfriend appeared. The following summer, he pried the screen off one of her windows, broke in while she slept upstairs with her children, and stole her phone. He was charged and eventually pleaded guilty to burglary. His sentence was community service, a written apology, and an order to stay away from her. She was so frightened that she moved. But Anderson had been a juvenile through all of it, so the record was sealed, invisible on any background check, never in the news.
Because Zachary Anderson was a juvenile at the time, the incident didn't make the news or appear on this public record.
To the family who welcomed him into their home a decade later, it was as if none of it had ever happened. When that woman learned what he had gone on to do, she came forward and spoke publicly. She said she'd felt sick, that she had never imagined his behavior could go this far. And she said she was speaking up in the hope that if there were others out there, they might find the courage to do the same. A documented warning, locked in a sealed file where no one who needed it could ever see it. For a while, the road to trial looked straightforward. A grand jury indicted Anderson on 19 counts, including first-degree murder, criminal sexual conduct, kidnapping, and interfering with a dead body. He pleaded not guilty, and the case began moving forward. But before it could reach a jury, his lawyers raised a challenge, one that had nothing to do with whether he'd done it, and everything to do with that night in the swamp. Anderson had told officers over and over that he didn't want to talk, that he was choosing to stay silent. That's a right every person has. And the officers, desperate to find Elena, had kept questioning him anyway. It was under that pressure that he'd led them to her body. His defense argued it violated his rights, and the judge, Cass County District Judge Jana Austad, agreed. She ruled the questioning improper, which meant his statements and the fact that he had led officers to the swamp could not be used against him. His lawyers went further, asking the court to throw out the indictment entirely and to bar evidence about the discovery of Elena's body, her clothing, and her blanket. For a moment, it raised a genuinely disturbing question. Could a case this horrific fall apart because the rules had been broken in the heat of the search? It couldn't. The judge refused to dismiss the indictment, and she let the physical evidence stand. Prosecutors had argued that Elena would have been found no matter what Anderson said. A K-9 was already on his scent, a helicopter was already sweeping the woods, and the search was closing in on that swamp with or without him. Her body, and everything found near it, was recovered independently of anything he was pressured into saying. The system had held to its own rules, even for a man accused of this. And the case survived. Then, on the 2nd of March, 2018, it ended in a way almost no one saw coming. Rather than face a jury, Anderson pleaded guilty to first-degree murder committed during a criminal sexual assault. In Minnesota, the punishment for that crime is fixed by law, life in prison, with no possibility of release, ever. He was sentenced the moment he entered the plea. The Cass County attorney, Benjamin Lindstrom, said their goal had been the maximum the law allowed, and that was exactly what the plea delivered. In that courtroom, Anderson described what he had done, and then he was led away to spend the rest of his life behind bars. And still, even with a full confession, the question that had haunted Watkins from the very first morning was never truly answered. No one ever learned why. So what does a town of 1,000 people do with something like this, when the man responsible was a friend, when the victim was a child, when there's no explanation to hold on to?
Families still struggling with the loss of their little girl is helping other families fighting their own heartache.
Her mother refused to let grief have the last word. That fall, on the Halloween that should have been Elena's 6th birthday, Kayla threw a party in her honor. It became an annual tradition, and then it became something bigger. A charity built in Elena's name, collecting toys and donations and giving them to sick children and grieving families. One of the first they helped had a young daughter fighting a rare cancer. Year after year, they've kept it going.
I've been putting on wristbands. I've helped do some stuff around for the silence auction, and it's been really fun.
Turning their own heartbreak into something that lifts other people up. In 2023, Watkins unveiled a life-sized statue of Elena in one of its parks, so that a little girl who loved being outside would always have a place there. Kayla had once told her that sunsets were heaven looking back. After Elena was gone, she said, she began seeing her daughter in them, in that gold light at the end of the day.
Nearly 2 months later, a memorial continues to grow outside their Watkins home. The home to a family sorely missing its youngest member.
She was very loving.
Elena was known for her friendliness and versatile personality, from her love of My Little Ponies to the time she spent hunting with her dad.
She'd come in our room every morning and give us a kiss good morning and, made sure everybody else was okay.
Kayla and Matt Ertl hold memories and many tokens close as they try not to concentrate on the evil that took Elena away.
She's an innocent little girl that did nothing wrong.
Matt had worked with Zach Anderson at a utility line company for 4 years. Anderson lived in Coon Rapids, so when they'd play softball in the summer, he'd sleep over. On that Saturday morning in August, the family woke up to find Anderson and Elena missing, along with Matt's pickup. 3 hours after an Amber Alert was issued, K-9 officers found Anderson near his family's cabin by Motley. Elena's body was found nearby. Investigators say she'd been sexually assaulted before Anderson killed her.
People that you think that you know, and that you trust, and become your friend, and you have in your home, and turn your back on you, and you don't understand it.
The Ertls admit they will struggle trusting new friends moving forward. Still, they are continuously reminded of the good that remains.
The support has been overwhelming.
Yeah.
Gifts and cards from so many touched by Elena's life.
This one, too, was a journal or a day by day.
Even strangers from states away pledging to be more patient parents and not taking the time they have with their own kids for granted.
He'll make comments of certain shows or different things he did that made her laugh.
The Ertles are pushing on for their son, Carter, and for their small community that created a public space to heal.
Look outside and there'd be 4 or 5 kids just sitting there reading books, and it's cool to see.
It's where they find comfort in the words they are certain Elena would want them to hear. When it rains, watch for rainbows. When it's dark, watch for stars.
There are pieces of this story that will never be put back together. Questions that will never be answered. A grief that simply becomes part of a place and part of a family, for good. But this is what people do in the face of the unthinkable. They gather up what's broken. They hold each other close. And even when they can't undo the storm, they find a way to keep rebuilding. A little girl in Watkins used to wave at everyone she passed on her walks, saying hi to people she barely knew. That's how the town still remembers her. Not for how her life ended, but for the fact that she was here at all. Before we leave this story, it's worth sitting with what it leaves behind. A few quiet takeaways. The first is the hardest. The danger here didn't come from a stranger in the dark. It came from inside a family's trust. A friend, a co-worker, a familiar face at the table. That's not a reason to fear everyone. But it's a reminder that watching for danger out there can blind us to the people already standing close. The second is about what stays hidden. There was a pattern in Anderson's past, documented years earlier. But because he'd been a juvenile, it was sealed away, invisible to everyone around him. It raises a hard question with no easy answer. How do we weigh a young person's right to a second chance against the safety of the people they'll meet later on? Reasonable people disagree, and this case is exactly what's at stake in that disagreement. The third is about the woman who came before. She was frightened, she reported what happened, and she was believed enough for charges to be filed. But the response was small, and she was left to move away to feel safe. When she finally spoke up, it was to reach anyone else who might have stayed silent. Escalating behavior deserves to be taken seriously the first time. And the people who speak can protect others they'll never meet. The fourth is about the law itself. In the middle of all this, a judge threw out evidence because the rules had been bent under pressure, even against a man who was guilty. It's easy to resent that in a case like this. But those protections only mean something if they hold for everyone, including the worst among us. The system that keeps its own rules, even when it hurts, is the same one that protects the innocent. And the last belongs to Watkins. They couldn't undo what happened. What they could choose was how the story ended, in bitterness or in care. They chose the vigil, the fundraiser, the charity that still helps sick children today, the statue in the park. They turned an unbearable loss into something that keeps giving. That choice was theirs to make. And it's the part of this story worth carrying with us.